You know, the political map never sleeps, and indeed the 2026 cycle has begun. And the very first senatorial candidate I've had on, who is up in 2026, is today's guest, Senator Scott Brown. Senator Brown is in New Hampshire, where he wants to run the Granite State, where he wants to go to the Granite State and represent the Granite State in Washington. Hello, Senator. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Oh, it's great to be on, and good evening to everybody.
You know, I only usually see you when we're in boxes opposite each other on Fox News, so this is more fun. I get to control the questions. Tell me about your decision to run again. You know what's involved. You know you got to raise money around the clock from now until whenever the election in November of 2026. Why do it again?
Well, as you know, I served as President Trump's ambassador to New Zealand, Cooke, Niue, Samoa, and our interest in Antarctica. When I came back, it was a completely different country. I'm from New Hampshire, born at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and was honored to serve, obviously, in Massachusetts, and obviously honored to serve as an ambassador. But in New Hampshire, we have Kelly Ayotte, former senator, now governor, a Republican Senate, House, and Executive Council. But we have four kind of knuckleheads that are representing us in the federal delegation that are completely out of touch with the New Hampshire advantage and the things that we actually know and love. That New Hampshire advantage is being attacked all the time. Higher taxes, more regulations, the men and boys and women and girls sports, open borders, sanctuary cities, defending these criminal gangbangers who want to basically hurt and kill our citizens. It's just not right. I had to get off the sidelines, because I can't stand it. And to think that the kid, Chris Pappas, who makes AOC look like Rush Limbaugh, wants to get a promotion, really turns my stomach. So I'm back in the game. It's going exceedingly well.
Let's tell people about the website a few times. It's just scottbrown.com. Am I right about that? Yes, scottbrown.com.
Very complicated. Scottbrown.com. You can obviously donate, and you can go up to $12,000 if you want. We have a lot of people doing just that. We've raised an incredible amount of money, more than I did, obviously, when we shook the world and took back the seat that was governed by Senator Kennedy for almost 50 years. So, yeah, it's been great.
I think there are legitimately two pickups opportunities for the Republicans, New Hampshire and Michigan. Some people say Minnesota. We'll see. It depends on, that's like our Hail Mary. But New Hampshire really ought to have a Republican senator. It did forever, did it? It always had 1 and 1.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I always had either 1 and 1 or Judd Gregg, you had Kelly Ayotte. I mean, you go on and on and on. Bob Smith, obviously. But here's the issue. I think actually with North Carolina and Georgia now potentially being kind of up for grabs, maybe, that this could be the seat that decides control of the Senate. And just picture this. We lose the House, and then you lose the Senate. The lawfare against President Trump, his family, his cabinet is going to be off the charts, and everything that he's working for right now will be reversed.
Yeah, I think maybe Georgia can go in that column. They need a candidate first. I'm glad you stepped forward, because you need a candidate before you can even think about flipping a seat. So, Chris Pappas, I don't know anything about him other than he's left-winger. What's his background, and will you intend to debate him early and often, as is the New Hampshire tradition?
Yeah, listen, I've already challenged him. I'll challenge him right here, right now. I'll debate him tomorrow, anytime, anywhere. This is a guy who actually owns a restaurant. He voted against the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. So how does he tell his employees that? And then also the Bluebird special folks, how do you say, I'm not going to give you a break on your Social Security? He is the person who's doubled down on the men and boys and women and girls sports. He has not stood up for our ICE and law enforcement officials. He does not support qualified immunity for those people. When President Trump boldly, I thought, went and did what he did in Iran, he said he was going to take those actions under advisement. And he didn't even commend our men and women who pulled off this. I thought I was reading like a Clancy novel, a Brad Thor novel. It's like unbelievable. And he couldn't even talk about that and commend them. Listen, we're two different people. As you know, I've run 21 times. I'm 19 and 2. I'm 65 years old. I have 4 grandchildren. Assessor, selectman, state rep, state senator, U.S. ambassador, almost 40 years in the military. And I tell you what, you want to compare resumes? Let's do it. But he is absolutely just wrong on every single issue. And that's what I'm going to debate him about, period. It's pretty simple.
Where did he come from? I'm always curious about the backstory for a left-wing congressman.
Listen, his family owns a restaurant here in Manchester. Nice guy, but he's just out of touch with the values of New Hampshire. I consider him like a floater, a backbencher, where he doesn't take a stand on really anything, comes back and portrays himself as a moderate, which he's not. And, kind of floats through. He was I think it was a city council, then a state rep, and then he got a promotion, and he wants another promotion And I'm going to do my best with your viewers and listeners' help to do that, so they can go, here we go, to scottbrown.com and help. And listen, if all your viewers, I know how many views you had, if they donated $1, we're talking about some massive amounts of money. So let's go.
Yeah, and the people in your car, just remember Scott Brown with 2 T's, scottbrown.com. Most of my audience is in their car driving home, Senator, so we want to do that. I want to throw a quick New Zealand question at you. They've had a succession of odd governments. I'm not sure. Are they still in Five Eyes? Are they still with us 100% of the time? Because they've had some pretty wacky left-wingers over there.
Yeah, listen, one of the greatest honors of my life was going over there and enhancing that military relationship. Right now, they have a right of center. Winston Peters, who is the foreign minister there, and Luxon, who's the prime minister there, doing a great job bringing it back to the center right. They do they play a valuable role in that relationship, because they get into countries that we don't. They have a relationship with like Iran and other countries that we really don't. So yes, they gather and they do their part. They I think actually do more heavy lifting than their size. 5 million people, 25 million sheep. But when I was there, we enhanced obviously a whole host of things: military cooperation, helped them work on purchasing more equipment and ships and the like. It was wonderful people, wonderful experience, and yes, I encourage them to stay there. And yeah, that's the government. It's in one of those MMP governments, back and forth, back and forth. But it was an honor.
I've always told my wife, with whom I've been married for 43 years, when I retire from this gig, we're going to New Zealand for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, because it's the place I haven't been that I want to be the most. Now, let me come close to home. There was the One Big Beautiful Bill. It had $158 billion for defense. A lot of that's going to go to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Did Chris Pappas vote against that?
Yeah, he did. And so did every other Democrat. And, the funny thing about it is, was it a perfect bill? No, but that's the only bill that was there. And here's the issue. He's focusing on Medicaid cuts. Well, just like Bill Clinton, I want people who are able-bodied basically to get off it, hopefully, but more importantly, at least work 4 hours a week, volunteer, do whatever. And I don't want anybody who's not supposed to be there, but every single person, Hugh, that needs it, who they are. We know people like that. They should absolutely get it. But if you do nothing, he didn't just say nothing. He said, no, hell no. That program's not going to be around if you do nothing. It's not sustainable what they're doing right now. And my biggest concern right now is our debt and deficit, because when I was down there, it was $9 trillion national debt. You know what it is now. So the clawbacks and all those things that they're doing, my first priority is to find mechanisms to save us money, hopefully lower our interest rates so we can refinance that debt. There's so many things. Rand Paul, I think, has some great ideas. I want to connect with him again and try to figure out, how do we get this? How do we reel this and put this genie back into the bottle? Hopefully exporting energy and unleashing that and creating more jobs and doing other things will help. But it's going to be tough. And we need some people who basically are fiscal conservatives up there, which I am.
The New Hampshire advantage is no taxes. The New Hampshire advantage is live free or die. The New Hampshire advantage now includes education choice. I don't understand why they have 2 very liberal senators, except I did see, up here in Maine, we get commercials around the clock from New Hampshire because they want to hit the TV market in northern New Hampshire. They want to hit Portsmouth, so they advertise in Portland, which goes all the way up north. I'm just curious, what does he run on? Does he run on being a left-winger? Because it's not a left-wing state.
Well, as you know, when I ran against Gene, I won CD1. I won the area where he represents. And I underperformed in CD2. So we're spending a ton of time up there. He's never run statewide. I did. I barely lost to Gene, as you know, by like 15,000 votes out of almost 600,000. And she's not walking through that door. What does he run on? He runs on, basically hating President Trump and everything he does, basically tying me to, being this hardcore, right-wing person, doesn't like people on Medicaid, doesn't like Social Security, doesn't like SNAP. Listen, my mom was on welfare. I got those blocks of cheese, the powdered milk, and the big blocks of butter. Okay, they're there for people that need it. But can't we have the agriculture department maybe find a way to make our food healthier and find better and cheaper ways to do it? Because it's administered through the governor, and I want to make sure I can help her. What is he going to do? Just keep complaining? Did he go to, on the Medicaid, did he go to Kennedy? Did he go to, obviously, Speaker Johnson? Did he go to the president and say, sir, I need help on this issue? It's not working? No. And you remember when I
Oh.
went and I was there, my insider trading bill, President Obama was walking up the dais in the State of the Union. I said, "Sir, my insider trading bill is up there. It's ready to pop. I need your help." He said, "Okay." That's what you do. You roll up your sleeves when you get the job done.
You work across the aisle. Scott Brown, keep coming back. Remember, everyone in your car, scottbrown.com, 2T, scottbrown.com. Get in the game early. Newt Gingrich rightly says $1 raised in 2025 is worth $5 raised in 2026. So be among the first to support Scott Brown. Senator, we'll see you early and often on either Fox or right back here on the Salem News Channel, Salem Radio Networks. Holding in my hands this book, Butler, which arrived, an hour ago, because I'm the last one to get it. But I still be on it because my son wrote me this morning saying, "Did you know that George Washington almost got capped in Butler?" I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, read the book." I said, "The book isn't here then." But then it arrived. So I have read the first chapter, Salena Zito, author of this bestseller, Butler. And I did not know that story. I can't remember how many George Washington books I've read. I don't remember someone trying to kill him. A Yinzer tried to kill George Washington. Is that what you're telling me?
No, it was a French Indian, and it was a command from the French. Came from the French commander because Washington tried to tell him to get off French land. You know, that area where we grew up was like disputed between New France and the colonies, and Washington was supposed to have him stop encroaching on the colonies, and the French commander sent a French Indian to kill him.
No, it happened in Butler. I just want people to get this straight. Ohio was part of the Northwest Territory, which was always free soil and was not yet a member, was not part of the Pennsylvania state colony in which our first president almost came to a harrowing end. I'm giving you a hard time, Salena, and I will enjoy this, and next week we will dive deep into it. But tell me about how book sales are doing with Butler.
Book sales are doing amazing. And the feedback that I've gotten from people across all parties is just how much they loved it. They learned so many new things. They had such a better understanding of what happened in the election last year, but also just what's happening in the country, how the coalitions are changing, and how the middle class and working class are now part of the Republican Party, and how the Democrats lost it, and how they can still continue to lose them.
Now, I have read the other three campaign books that have come out thus far about the election, Fight, Original Sin, and now 2024. Only in 2024 is much made of the day in Butler. And they talked to Susie Wiles, obviously. And I didn't realize it was Susie Wiles who asked the doctor to get on the plane after the ER visit. Did she talk to you as well as the president and everybody else? Obviously, Chris LaCivita did because he's a Steelers fan. But what about everybody else?
Yeah, everybody. Everybody is throughout the book. It's really richly written, lots of different voices, lots of different viewpoints. Most importantly, the people that changed the election results. Those are the most important people in the story. And obviously, the president as well. He's in it throughout there.
How many times? It seems like you must have sat down with him a half dozen times since that happened. Is that on the low side?
That's on the low side.
Yeah. So he's obviously decided you're fair. And I'm curious, why did he sit down with you about this latest interview, which you've just posted about recently having to do with the energy future of Yinzerland?
Oh, my goodness. It's the most exciting news outside of the U.S. Steel Nippon deal to happen. If that is a game changer, AI energy is the revolution that's going to change not just Pennsylvania, but also places like Ohio, West Virginia. We talked about like these three components that make the AI energy boom that's coming important because the AI data power centers, they need hundreds, like so much energy to make them go, to move, to work, and the energy is abundant in the Rust Belt, Great Lakes states like yours and mine. And what we also have in those states are great research universities, like CMU, like Case Western, universities that will provide the engineers, the artificial intelligence technicians, the geologists, all of that intellect that is needed. But even more importantly is the workforce, right? No,
Yep.
places like Ohio, places like Pennsylvania, these are where a lot of these skilled artisans, right? Welders, plumbers, boilermakers, steam fitters, or carpenters, all of these men and women. It is an unbelievable new opportunity for growth, and the president is really committed to encouraging young people as young as in middle school to think about the trades. When I went to high school, you took shop class, right? It was right beside home ec. And you learned to tinker and make things. And if you were good at it, it opened the door and interested you in things like welding and mechanics and all those things I just talked about. So you have a really interesting constituency that's a part of this growth. You have the intellect, you have the energy, and you have the working class.
And you have the Ohio State University about an hour and a half away. And for
Yeah.
bouncers, you can go to College Station for bouncers. I want to ask you though about the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. You obviously interviewed him for this book as well. Will
Yeah.
Governor Shapiro talk to you about Mr. Mamdani? I was on Fox News earlier today with John Roberts, and I said, I just think he's an anti-Semite. I've looked at his record, and it's going to put Josh Shapiro in a very unusual situation. Have you talked to him about it yet?
I have not talked to him about it yet. I did talk to him yesterday. One of the things that were really awesome about that energy summit yesterday were all the it was Democrats and Republicans throughout the event. Shapiro was there, Fetterman was there, McCormick had organized it. The President Trump was there as well, and so it's a really richly bipartisan issue. But no, we didn't talk about that. Honestly, I was so focused on energy, and this is a failure of my part. I didn't think to ask him.
Don't worry, he'll talk to you anytime. I want to conclude by saying Butler is available in airports now. It's in bookstores now. It's at Amazon.com now. And we'll find out on tomorrow where it is on the New York Times bestseller list, unless they've already slipped that to you. Do you know yet, Salena?
No, no, you're
You,
much more optimistic than I am.
I am an optimist because I know how many people have ordered Butler and are ordering it right now, and that should count on the pre-order sales and on the bestseller list, although the New York Times does not like books written by, for, or about conservatives. So, Salena, we'll look tomorrow and check it out, and we'll talk tomorrow at length, or next week at length, about Butler, now that I have my own copy of Butler. Salena Zito, thank you. Follow her on X at Zito Salena, or go to salenazito.com for all things Salena. Thank you, Salena. Got to take my Relief Factor right now. There it is. I'm in the Relief Factor studio. And I take it every day in the first hour, and then I remind you about it in hours 2 and 3. And I've been doing so for more than a decade. 4 pills in every packet. They're right there if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. And it takes just that little amount of time to every day guarantee that you can get the miles in that you want to get in. You can go out and kayak away. I'm supposed to kayak after the show today. Not one of my skill sets. A little bit unwieldy for me. But if I capsize, I can swim, so that's okay. But it might cause some minor aches and pains because I'll be using muscles I do not normally use when I trundle. And that's what Relief Factor is for. Don't mask your pain with over-the-counter. Get rid of it with anti-inflammatory support that comes from Icarian and curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Call 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF. Ask for the starter pack. It's $19.95, less than $1 a day. Or go to their website, relieffactor.com, and then thank me for it in a couple of months. President Trump was meeting in the Oval today with the Prime Minister of Bahrain, and he got a couple of questions about Jerome Powell, which of course have impacted the market. Let's play for you cut number 5.
Do you have plans, or if you're back considering firing Jerome Powell? And what's your justification if you're thinking about this to do this?
Too late. He's always been too late, hence his nickname, Too Late. He should have cut interest rates a long time ago. Europe has cut them 10 times in the short period of time, and we cut them none. The only time he cut them was just before the election to try and help Kamala or Biden, whoever the hell it was, because nobody really knew. Obviously, that didn't work, but he tried to cut them for the Democrats, Kamala. And how did that work out? You'll tell me. It didn't work out too well, did it? But he's I think he does a terrible job. He's costing us a lot of money. And we fight through it. It's almost, the country's become so successful that it doesn't have a big impact, but it does hurt people wanting to get a mortgage. People
Let's
want to
stop
buy a
right there.
house.
He's absolutely right. Now, he told the reporter he's not going to fire Powell. He talked to a lot of senators. He talked to a lot of people. He's not going to fire the Federal Reserve Chairman. As a result, let's do the market update right now, brought to you by American Federal. I normally do it in the second hour, but AmericanFederal.com sponsors it once a day. And when the president makes remarks that impact the market, it was down earlier today. Now it's up because the market doesn't like sudden changes, even though Jerome Powell is too late, if that's his nickname. Right now, and by the way, AmericanFederal.com, they buy and sell gold. Nick Grovich and his team will buy and sell gold with you, or silver or other precious metals. All you have to do is call them at 800-221-7694. Been my sponsor for a couple of years now. I love them to death. They are so honest and so transparent. That's who I bought gold from in January, who I recommend all of you who are going to buy gold actually only go to someone where the endorser has done business with them. Only do that, and I have done business with Nick and AmericanFederal.com, and I believe that they are as good as anyone in the business and better than most. I'll say probably in the top 5% because it's transparent, it's honest, it's very, very driven by what your needs are, what the price is, what the commission is. It's all laid out for you. Call them at 800-221-7694. After the president's remarks on Powell, the Dow is right now 0.41% up. The S&P is up 0.28%. The NASDAQ is up 0.22%. And whatever it means, gold went up a lot today to $3,555 or $3,554 I see right now. So they like the idea that interest rates are going to come down over the next couple of months because they see there perhaps some advantage in inflation, and central banks are buying gold. Why aren't you? The market is happy. The economy is puffing along. The one big beautiful bill passed. Time perhaps to diversify, take some of the profits off of the top of your frothy market and put them into good, old, reliable gold, and do it with Nick Grovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com, 800-221-7694. Now, at the end of the president's comments there, he said interest rates would help some people who are trying to buy a home. He's absolutely right, because one of our great sponsors is AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. All they do is lend you money to buy homes. And I keep my finger on the pulse of home buying in America by talking to Andrew pretty much every week, but if not every week, every other week, checking in on what's going on, the volume of business, which has picked up steadily as people have come to realize mortgage rates are in the 6s, and they're going to stay in the 6s until probably a year from now, but you can't wait that long. Here's the deal. When you buy with AndrewandTodd.com and you get a mortgage from Sierra Pacific, they keep all the paperwork. They keep all the background. They know all about your credit. They'll help you repair your credit a little bit if you got a few dings on it. They'll get you into the house you want to buy right now because you're moving or the perfect house has come up. And you're going to buy it at 6.5% or a little bit more or a little bit less, depending on your particulars, where it is, how much money you're putting down. They never advertise a rate because they're honest. Honest as the day is long. I've known Andrew for 20 plus years. I've known Todd Avakian for half as long. They did my mortgage when we moved from California back to the Beltway. They did Dwayne's mortgage. They've done the mortgage for thousands and thousands and thousands of customers who originated by listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. When you call them, 888-888-1172, they start with the basics. Where are you? What do you want to do? Do you own a house? How much do you make? That sort of stuff. You can give them a little bit of a head start if you go to AmericanFederal.com and fill out a couple of questions. It makes it easier for them to help you with your request for guidance on what to do in this situation. Getting a mortgage is never easy. It is easiest when you do it with AndrewandTodd.com. A veteran, don't want to put any money down? Perfect. First-time home buyer? Fine. Whatever, a senior citizen, you want a reverse mortgage? They do that as well. andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. Mary Katharine Ham is back with us. Hammer is, of course, the host of Getting Hammered and of the Normally podcast. Mary Katharine, I agree with Vic Mattis. Undoubtedly, you have the highest-ranked quarterly podcast in America. And
That's right.
I want people to know you intend to come back more often when your summer break is kind of over, right?
We do. It's just, we're working through our stuff. And also the camp drop-off and schedules during the summer end up being sometimes more trouble than during the school year. You think you're relaxing, and then you're not.
Well, I got to say, you're very discomforting to me because the plan for the big family get-together is to have Genghis Kate, the 5-year-old, in the same bunk room with the 2 3-year-olds. How do you think that's going to work out?
You know what? We've done similar configurations, and it can work. But you do have to just submit all the belongings in that room to the gods and let what happens happens.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit worried about the fact that your youngest is climbing to the top of the desk. I'm just a little bit worried. Let's get to this recent edition of Getting Hammered, which is available now, because you deal with 2 things that I have to deal with today, Epstein and the auto pen. Let me start with the disgusting and despicable Epstein and my belief, which I wrote a week ago, that there is nothing here. There's no there. There is no list. He was a creep. He was a criminal, and he killed himself. End of story. Yeah. Why is it lingering?
It's lingering because I think for many people, and I understand why, it looks like this thing has stunk from the beginning. And I think some of it just has. Even if that's the whole story, it has stunk from the beginning, and that he got that sort of sweetheart deal in the beginning. There are a lot of powerful people involved. To many people, it became this decoder ring for all of elite corruption. Like as soon as this was all revealed, that you would know exactly how the wheels turned and exactly how everything worked. Now, I do think it was handled incompetently, or at times maybe with corruption. But I also think the story could be rather simple, and that what they were able to get Maxwell on in court is what there is, right? I think the administration just should have said, hey, this is under appeal. We can't do much while that's happening, because that is true. And then you wouldn't have made promises that you can't keep, which is, I think, the larger issue here is that, like, this guy was a creep. There are many real victims that we won't hear from, partly because they have NDAs. One of the issues with releasing all this information is it has a lot of victim info in it. But like, people believe that Trump and that the people he hired were going to sort of like blow the doors off of this thing. And I think they simply can't do that for various reasons, or can't give all the files. And a lot of people made a lot of hay off of this for many years, so they're mad about it.
Oh, this is the nub of the issue. A lot of people have made a lot of money off of peddling Epstein conspiracy theories that can no longer do so. When Pam Bondi says it's on my desk right now, I listen with lawyer ears. That means there's a pile of papers on her desk that she's got to go through. There was no list on the desk. Did you think she meant a list?
I've never been of the mind that there's this explicit list, generally because people who are doing extremely illegal things don't write down the extremely illegal things that they are doing.
Exactly.
So I've been skeptical about that claim from the beginning.
All right, now let's move to the auto pen, because today Anthony Bernal, about whom I knew nothing until 2 weeks ago when I started reading campaign books by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson and the latest by Josh Stassi and his co-authors. Bernal's a very ominous, sinister character that I did not know existed. He may have been running the auto pen. He got called up to Congress today and just took the Fifth Amendment like Joe Biden's doctor did. What do you think is the reality behind this?
It's all so shady, Hugh. And when it comes to the pardon stuff, like, I don't know what consequences there can be, because there's it's fairly expansive power, but the power rests with the executive, right? And the question is not whether an auto pen is okay to use sometimes. We have agreed upon that as a society in various like ceremonious situations. But like, this is a huge power that is granted to the executive. And these people are saying in print in the New York Times that it didn't have a check back mechanism. Like, they were changing the lists. He not only wasn't signing them with his real hand, but he was not even aware of who was on the list because they didn't bother to check with him. And the reason they didn't bother to check with him is because the guy was not with it enough to do the job, which leads to the question, how many things did these people do that nobody elected that are not their job, but were his?
And who picked the judicial nominees in the last year? I'd like to know that because they're kind of left-wing nuts. But Mary Katharine, I wrote a column today for the Washington Examiner. I don't know if you remember when Donald Trump asserted the power to declassify by just thinking about it. That's actually, yes, by the way, my view of the executive when it comes to declassification because he's commander-in-chief. He can merely will it. He doesn't have to sign anything. There's no procedure. The number of people that jump down his throat are now the same number of people who are defending Joe Biden's use of the auto pen.
Right.
You can't hold disdain for Trump's assertion of power and yet defend Biden's. I guess you can if you're not going to be honest with people, but they are not reconcilable. Do you think they are?
No, I mean, look, this is the thing that liberals do, though, right? Is consistency is the enemy. They're like, oh, well, we do it for the right reasons, so it's good. When we do it, it's good. It is as simple of that as that most of the time when it comes to media coverage, double standards and lefty double standards.
All right, last question's about Mr. Mamdani. I was on Fox earlier today, asked about him. I think he's an anti-Semite. I don't think it's particularly hard to prove that or to have that opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who can't just outright reject, globalize the Intifada and needs to contextualize it, I think is a problem. And yeah, I think that it is a sign that this is the direction that the Democratic Party's base, particularly the more left-leaning rabid folks in it, are moving. That's where the fire is. That's where the money is. Sometimes the literal fire, I guess, with the fire bombings and such. And that it's going to be pretty nasty if this guy ends up mayor of New York City because they ran Cuomo against him, who is so dislikable and fraught with his own controversies.
Is he more of a problem than any other Democrat who's a left-wing nut? And we got like 30 seconds. Because I think, unlike Bill de Blasio, people are going to pay attention to Mamdani much more than they have paid attention to de Blasio. Agree?
I think he's a problem because he seems quite ideological, quite economically ignorant, quite uninterested in how these things would actually affect people. And he can talk and he's sort of charming, so he's going to become a big star. Then he'll have more influence.
A big star, a big Democratic star, and we're going to make sure every Democrat wears that star with great pride. Mary Katharine Ham, follow her on X at MK Hammer, and go get the latest Getting Hammered. It's not a quarterly podcast. It's an occasional podcast that after summer breaks, we hope gets back to being a weekly or bi-weekly podcast. Thank you, Mary Katharine. The threat of flooding has returned to Central Texas, where 135 people lost their lives in the July 4 flooding. The relief workers are still on the ground, doing the best they can to find what is left and to help the people who've been lost of everything, including, well, listen to these rescue workers.
Elite forensic divers from across the country giving their time and money to search for bodies.
How dangerous is this recovery work?
There is a bit of risk to it just because of the visibility. We don't have any visibility at all, so everything's by feel. It was because of the amount of kids that were lost. We felt the need to come down and do our part. This is Americans helping other Americans is what it's all about.
Lots of Americans have stepped up over at my website, the Help Texas banner, which you can see on the Salem News Channel if you're watching, or you can hear me say right now at the top of HughHewitt.com if in your car. You can send relief via our sponsor, Food for the Poor. They're staging out of San Antonio. They're running relief kits by the thousands up to the hill country. $50 sends another one. They go to the people who have lost everything, people who are hungry, people who do not have any basic necessities, including toothpaste and toothbrushes and everything else that goes with at least keeping your humanity during a period of awful destruction. Thank you in advance for helping. You can go to the website, find the banner at the top, or you can text my name, Hewitt, to 51555, or you can call in a donation, 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. Thousands you have done so already. Thank you. Whatever you can give, thank you. $5, $5,000, $500,000. Food for the Poor can be trusted. They are a good steward, and they have a great partner in San Antonio. Give them a call today or go to the website. Now I want to go to the floor of the Senate where they're debating defunding NPR and PBS. Here, Senator Eric Schmidt of Missouri, cut number 14.
NPR and PBS are not neutral media outlets. They are the closest thing we've ever had in this country to Pravda. They are the arms of the left-wing
Senator
activists.
Schmidt. Now let's hear the other side from Chuck Schumer, cut number 15.
Now let's talk about the cuts to the CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Millions and millions of Americans, over 10 million Americans, 13, live in regions of the country that will be affected by these cuts, including millions of rural Americans and native tribes. And these cuts to local stations couldn't happen.
Do you really want to be in a position where your last remaining line of defense is Chuck Schumer, staring down at a piece of paper that he can't read very well, trying to tell you that PBS is vitally necessary to rural America and to the tribes on their tribal lands? You really want to go down with that ship? I don't think it's going to work. I think the rescission is going to move through and be signed by the president by Friday. And finally, NPR and PBS have been on the public dole since 1967. Finally, they will be off of it and obliged to compete on a fair and level playing field with those of us in the business who do not get your taxpayer dollars to keep us going. Rather, we got to earn your trust and your credibility, and we got to have advertisers, which is the way the market works. And that's America. The Democrats are in for a rough ride in 2026, according to Harry Ensign of CNN. He ran some polling numbers last night that made me sit up and say, I didn't know that. Cut number 13.
The bottom line is this. Democrats are behind their 2006 and 2018 paces when it comes to the generic congressional ballot. What are we talking about here? All right, the Democrats versus the Republicans on the generic congressional ballot, the margins. Look at where we are now. Democrats are ahead, but by just 2 points. Look at where Democrats were already ahead by in 2017. They were behind by 7 points. How about 2005 on the generic congressional ballot? Ahead by 7 points, ahead by 7 points, and now they're only ahead by 2 points. Their lead is less than half of where it was in either 2017 or 2005 in July of those years, the year before the midterm election. Yes, Donald Trump may be unpopular, but Democrats have not come anywhere close to sealing the deal at this particular point.
Harry, I just got to point out, it's not less than half, it's less than a third of the advantage that they had in 2017 and 2005. Long way away, but that's why I'm beginning to introduce candidates to you like Scott Brown in New Hampshire. Now, I mentioned earlier with Mary Katharine Ham, about 3 hours ago, I was on Fox News, 2 hours ago. John Roberts asked me to come on and talk about Mr. Mamdani, and I was happy to do so. Let's play that exchange. Cut number 1.
All right, Senator Hugh Hewitt is the host of the Hugh Hewitt Show on Fox News Radio. He's also a Fox News contributor. Good to have you with us today. I wanted to ask you, first of all, about all of this secrecy surrounding the Mamdani visit. The fact that the location was changed at the last minute. There was brown paper put up on all the windows of the restaurant that the folks were meeting him in so that peering eyes couldn't see in. What do you make of all of that?
I think Mr. Mamdani is a anti-Semite, that's my opinion, and that as a result, he's got to be very careful about cameras being around and microphones being turned on when he talks about anything remotely connected to anti-Semitism or in what he'd like to call anti-Zionism. I'd tell the audience, if you just Google a Politico story from June 22nd, it assembles all the evidence of Mr. Mamdani's anti-Semitism. And the fact that he's going to discourage the use of the term globalize the Intifada, that would be like him saying, I'm going to discourage Holocaust denial. Really, you don't have to do that unless you've been hanging out with Holocaust deniers. I don't buy it. I don't think the public's going to buy it. But whether New York ends up with a mayor who is an anti-Semite is up to New Yorkers, and whether or not Andrew Cuomo will get out of the race and Curtis Lee was, so that Eric Adams has a shot at winning.
I mean, New York Governor Kathy Hochul was on a rival network earlier today, and she said that Mamdani has got a lot of explaining to do. Listen here.
I actually raised many of those concerns with him directly. I said, you have a lot of healing to do with the Jewish community. Many of your words have been hurtful and hateful to people and their interpretation of it. So job number one is to straighten that relationship out if you can.
I mean, straighten out the relationship. The words that come out of a person's mouth usually reflect what's in their hearts. But suddenly you can say to a group of business leaders in New York City, oh, I would discourage people from using the phrase globalize the Intifada. And yet there's this long record about him, as you point out.
Oh, I got to tell you, John, that the governor there was doing abba dabba 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 because she's a seasoned veteran of New York politics, and she knows that she has to keep the left wing of New York politics happy, and they don't want her to say the truth about Mr. Mamdani, which is, since he was an undergraduate at Bowdoin, he has been actively and aggressively attacking the state of Israel, saying that it's an apartheid state, which it is not, and he refuses to say the same about other countries that are, for example, Muslim countries, which is just fine, like the Jewish state is the Jewish state. Saudi Arabia is a Muslim country. He has a double standard. That double standard points, I think, definitely, without any question, to his being anti-Semitic, and that the reason he cannot talk to the press at length is that you cannot actually be an anti-Semite without revealing it within about 10 minutes of serious questioning.
And yet, despite all of that, you had all of these Democrats very excited to meet him earlier today, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez being the cheerleader in chief. Listen to what she said.
Really excited for the Democratic nominee, Zohar Mamdani, to be here in Washington, is to really, experience and have people see him face to face. I think a lot of people just need to get to know folks before they issue an endorsement, and I hope that this conversation can be constructive to bringing the party together and rallying behind our nominee.
Do you see this as, the fact that this is going national with all these members of Congress, do you see this as an attempt to normalize Mamdani and his ultra-left-wing policies?
That's well said, John. It is an attempt to normalize. AOC is not a normal Democrat. AOC is a socialist. Bernie Sanders is a socialist. They identify with the Democratic Party when it's convenient. So it's a very unusual attempt to socialize AOC and her politics of the squad into the center of the Democratic Party. And every Democrat who's watching has got to decide, do we want that to be our brand? AOC's got charisma. Mamdani has charisma. But they also have extraordinarily left-wing politics. And in the case of Mr. Mamdani, he's also an anti-Semite. Do they really want that to be their brand? I don't think so.
Right. Well, every Democratic strategist that I've talked to said, oh, this is just a New York City race. It's not reflective of politics across the country. Doesn't affect any of these big races. But I'll tell you, Gen Z has latched onto this guy, and Democrats are going to start to push a lot of candidates just like him.
John, as you noted, I run a national radio show. It's on the Salem network, not the Fox network, but I work for Fox. I run a national radio show. People want to talk about Mamdani every day. They want to talk about him every day, whether they're out in California, down in Florida, up in the Northwest. It doesn't matter where they are. They want to talk about him because New York City is the greatest city in the world. And if they elect at least a socialist, and on many things, when he's talking about the anti-commodification of housing, he's kind of a communist. Then he's going to have to talk to national people about national issues because he is a national figure.
All right. Well, he's generating a lot of enthusiasm among young left-wing Democrats. We'll see where this all goes. Hugh, always great to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it.
It's going to go in the dumper. Love talking with John. John and I are the white hair crowd, and he wears it better than I do. But he's a pro. I love talking to him about national stories like this. Now, I also love listening to Donald Trump when he's taking Q&A with the press in the Oval, as he did earlier today. He lashed out at the Epstein files smartly. Cut number 3.
Mr. President, I know you want to move past all this intrigue over the Epstein files, but I do want to ask you to clarify something you said this morning. You said this was all a hoax. Has your Attorney General told you this was a hoax? What evidence have you seen?
No, it's not the Attorney General. No, I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier that turned out to be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the intelligence, so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work. The Democrats are good for nothing other than these hoaxes. They're bad for policy. They're bad for picking candidates that can get elected. Like in New York, we have a communist running. He may get elected too, actually, but he'll destroy the city. I call it the Epstein hoax. It takes a lot of time and effort. Instead of talking about the great achievements, we've had a great gentleman yesterday, as you know, went on CNBC and he made the statement that Trump may go down as the greatest president of all in the United States. And instead of talking about the things we've achieved, we've had tremendous achievement They're wasting their time with a guy who obviously has some very serious problems, who died 3-4 years ago. I'd rather talk about the success we have with the economy, the best we've ever had, and all of the
Luck with
things
that,
we've
Mr.
done.
President, because nobody in the media wants to help you. You have to make your own news, and so he did. He let people know about the one big, beautiful bill in the Oval today, cut number 7.
We just got the biggest tax cut in history. We just got the biggest regulation cuts in history. There'll be no tax on tips. There'll be no tax on Social Security. There'll be no tax on overtime. There'll be no tax on so many other things. You're allowed to deduct your interest from a car payment. That's never happened before. You borrow interest. You borrow money to buy a car if the car is made in America. And by the way, factories are being built all over America. Car factories, AI factories. But you get a deduction on your interest. Nobody ever thought of that before. It never happened before.
He's right. And wherever you are depends on what you're paying, which is why the American Legislative Exchange Council puts out richstatespoorstates.com. richstatespoorstates.com is where you go to find out how your state is doing on matters economic, matters taxation, matters education, matters everything. Where do you want to live? If you're going to go flip a coin and decide, I'm going to get out of California, I'm leaving New York, where are you going to go? Go look up richstatespoorstates.com. They will send it to you for free. They've been my sponsor for a long time, alec.org/Hugh. They're meeting in Indianapolis right now, and I wish that Lisa and John were joining me, but they are busy because they've got their big meeting in Indianapolis. But you can go get richstatespoorstates.com today for free and sign up for the State of the State newsletters at alec.org/Hugh, alec.org/Hugh. And remember, when you pick a state that makes it easier to prosper, not harder to thrive. richstatespoorstates.com. John Campbell was a member of Congress for a decade. He spent a lot of that time on the Federal Reserve Subcommittee of the Financial Services Committee, which he helmed. So I've been thinking about him ever since President Trump opened up his rat-a-tat-tat attack on Jerome Powell. I want to ask you, what impact at all do you think that has on the Fed chairman's decisions? And can the president fire him, do you think? And can he force him out if he can't fire him?
Okay, that's kind of 3 questions there. So let's take them in the order in which you presented them. Federal Reserve chairs do care what Congress and the president think of them. And when Ben Bernanke was Federal Reserve Chair, and I was the chairman of the committee, as you alluded to, that oversaw the Federal Reserve, I had breakfast with him once a quarter, and he always wanted to explain to me what they were doing and why they were doing it, and how could he make sure that people in Congress understood what he was doing and why, and so they wouldn't get mad at him. That said, Mr. Trump is so aggressive about this, he could actually possibly be pushing Mr. Powell in a different direction. Powell is in, he's not in the 9th inning, but he's in the 8th inning of his term as Federal Reserve Chair. And so he may be thinking, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do. I don't care what this guy says because I only got a few more months and then I'm sailing down the road. So I'm not sure it impacts him that much. And a number of the Biden appointees, which there are several on the board who vote, and remember, the chairman doesn't decide things autocratically. The chairman leads the committee, and the Open Market Committee tends to follow what the chair says. But they are independent votes. I mean, if they want to overrule him, they can. And I can assure you that what the president's saying makes the Biden people on there want to go in the opposite direction. Now, can he fire him? There's a little bit of a problem, apparently, in the Federal Reserve with its own books, nothing to do with monetary policy, but actually for the accounting of the Federal Reserve itself, that there was some money that might have been lost or something. There's been some suggestions that if that's a serious problem, it could be a fireable offense that would enable Mr. Trump to fire him for cause, basically. Trump today, just a few hours ago, said he is not ruling anything out, but he thinks it's very unlikely that he would fire Mr. Powell. So now what can he do? What he can do if he wants to sort of force him out early is appoint his successor. He could do that tomorrow. Appoint his successor, in the next month or 2 months. Mr. Powell's term is up in May of next year. So what is that? Another 10 months or something, 9 months. He could appoint a successor, then go to Senate Majority Leader John Thune and say, I want you to confirm this guy. And if you get a successor appointed and confirmed by the Senate, and that successor starts to give speeches and so forth, that really undercuts the existing chair. And that might be a situation where the existing chair would go ahead and leave a few months earlier than the end of his term. And so
as a matter of constitutional law, I think the president can fire him. I don't know if you think that's advisable. I think he can, because there's only one executive branch. The Supreme Court seems to be indicating that he might be entitled to back pay if he's fired without cause, but he still can be fired because the executive branch runs on the president's side. You think it's a bad idea to fire him?
I do, actually. I think people believe that the Federal Reserve is independent. It's quasi-independent, but as I said, they pay a lot of it. They come and testify, before Congress, and they pay a lot of attention to what Congress thinks and what the president thinks. And every president has gotten the Fed to do things they want to do. Famously, Richard Nixon in 1972 got the then Federal Reserve chair, whose name escapes me right now,
Arthur Burns.
To lower interest rate. No, I think it was before Burns, or was it Burns? Okay. Anyway, he got the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates before his reelection campaign in 1972. So this is not something new for the president to lean on the chair of the Federal Reserve to do the things the president wants that chair to do. But I think that because the public perceives them to be independent, it's hitting a ball into a net that Trump doesn't need to do. And as I said,
so let me ask the more important question. Would lowering interest rates right now be good for the economy or bad for the economy? And if they would be good, how far should they cut? The president in the Oval said every country in Europe's cutting rates. I think he's right about that. Why are we so slow?
Okay, so I'm not personally in favor of it, but let me give you both why the president would want to do it and then what I think the results would be. The reason, or the negative parts would be, the reason he would want to do it. When you cut rates, you're cutting short-term rates, okay? That's the Federal Reserve, the discount rate. And that is going to affect rates for 1, 2, 3 years and less term. So what does that do in the economy? That lowers the rates necessary for a loan to buy a car, okay? Auto industry will love that. Rates go down, payments go down, people can buy more cars. That's great. It will also lower the rates for loans like personal loans, and probably won't affect credit cards, but personal loans. The other thing it will do is that it will, but what it probably will do in September, the Fed lowered rates by 0.5%. The long-term rates, the 10-year rate, went up by 0.5%. How come the longer-term rate went up when they lowered the short-term rate? Because they believed it's inflationary. The market, the Fed controls short-term rates, the market controls longer-term rates. The market believed that this was inflationary, there was going to be inflation, so they raised longer-term rates. 30-year mortgages are based on the 10-year mortgage, on the 10-year Treasury bill. So if you lower short-term rates, car loans go down, personal loans go down, but 30-year mortgage rates will probably go up, maybe to 8% or higher if that happens. But I talked to someone the other day. I said, well, that would crush the housing market, wouldn't it? And he says, no. And I said, why not? And he says, because what they'll do is the mortgage people will switch to short-term, 3 and 5 year term. Adjustables with a 30-year amortization. Now, the problem is that's what we did in 2007 and 2008 that led to the financial crisis in 2008. So, but if you do that, Trump said 2 days ago he'd like to see the rates go down 3%. That would make a 30-day rate a little over 1. So that would mean you could get maybe a 3-year adjustable rate mortgage for 3% or something like that. But it would be only 3 years, and then it would expire. You'd have to refinance it, et cetera, et cetera. Price of your house went down, you'd be in trouble. So there's a lot of nuances in this. The other thing that would do is an awful lot of seniors are going on trips and doing things with their money because they have it in Treasury bills. They're earning almost 5%. You change that they earn almost 1%. And all those seniors and all those savers now cut back. they start to spend less. So it's not a panacea. If you lower the interest rates, what Trump says, 3% or 1% or 2%, whatever, it's not a panacea. The rates for some things will go down. That will help the economy. The rates for some other things will probably go up. That will hurt the economy. Some people will lose income. That will hurt the economy. And housing, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of these 3-year ARMs that we did back in 2007.
I've never been, but if you think interest rates are going down, they make a good play. John Campbell can be followed on X at JBT Campbell, JBT Campbell, and you ought to get his newsletter Through the Chaos, Look Through Chaos, and you can find that by following at JBT Campbell on X. Thank you, John. One of my sponsors is Americans for a Balanced Budget, and they have also got John McLaughlin, one of the country's best pollsters, working for them. Hello, John. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. How are you?
Hello, Hugh. It's great to be here.
Now, John, I have been quoting you as advocating for the extension of the health tax credits and showing that 7 out of 10 or even more of Trump supporters support that. Can you explain what they are and why they matter so much to Trump voters?
Yeah, right. It's really important because it kind of got eclipsed because of the Trump tax cuts getting renewed. In the process, everybody was arguing about Medicaid, where the government provides health care, and there was a debate whether illegal immigrants should get it or people who don't work should be, able-bodied adults should be getting it. That's different. These are working Americans who buy through the individual marketplace. They buy their own health insurance, and some of them, based on need, get tax credits. But it's for whatever reasons, they could be working 1, 2, 3 jobs, and their employers don't provide health care. So they go and they go into the individual markets and they go and they buy this health care, and sometimes they get tax credits. And what we found is that Americans support this. They support the tax cuts, the premium tax credits, and 83-10 overall. And Trump voters supported 81-13. Democrats, sure, they support 88-5, but Republicans supported 83-12 and independents 78-13. And they don't want the tax credits to expire, which could happen in October. They have to renew these tax credits, and Congress needs to focus.
I have explained to my audience, John, that Obamacare screwed up the healthcare marketplace very badly in 2010. And part of repairing that have been these tax credits for people who were forced out of other plans. Some employers dropped them. Some employers don't make them available anymore. Some union plans got revoked. It was a very complicated shakeout. One of the make goods were these tax credits. They're tax cuts for working people forced into the Obamacare exchanges. Do any Republicans oppose them at all? And why weren't they in the one big beautiful bill?
Well, I don't know about members of Congress. I'm a pollster, so I poll the people outside the Beltway. And they should, because look, when I worked for President Trump, I worked for him through all 3 campaigns. We rebuilt the Republican Party, that it's now a working class coalition. Basically the caddies are running the country club, but the caddies need health care. We need to make sure these working people can keep their health care. And when you asked about do they support preserving the tax credits, this is all voters. All voters. When you support preserving the premium tax credits to continue to lower health care costs and access for hardworking Americans, sure, who could be against that? As opposed to I support ending the tax credits, which would raise taxes and increase health care costs. 74-11, all Americans support those tax credits. Republicans 71-14. 80-9, Democrats, Independents 71-10. Trump voters supported 70-15 because we don't want to have to pay for free health care or the higher costs for Medicaid or other premium costs on our own insurance, to cover these Americans if they lose their health care coverage. So now, you're John, exactly right.
If we don't extend it, what will be the impact on the 2026 cycle? I began today's program with Scott Brown. He's running for Senate in New Hampshire. I'd like him to flip that. I'd love to have Mike Rogers win in Michigan, somebody win in Georgia. I'd love to flip some seats. But if we start taking away tax credit, we're not going to win any seats, are we?
Oh, no, and by the way, I'm working for Dan Anderson, New Hampshire, so I have a primary there. But
Oh, you do?
and Mike
Okay.
Rogers too, in Michigan, I'm helping. So,
Oh, good.
but we'll end up. There's a real severe downside where, the Americans, if we have to, when we ask them about the policies would force 8.2 million Americans to lose their health insurance coverage. 84% of all voters, 94% of all voters said that's concerning. 66, very concerning. So if you really want to take take a hit in the next election, don't extend the tax credits. Over the next decade, these policies will impose more than $1 trillion of added cost burden on healthcare providers like hospitals, resulting in closures, causing Americans, especially rural areas, lose access to care. 94 concerning, 63 very concerning. So we'll have a big
I got this is not hard. This should be on the next reconciliation. It ought to be blowing through there before the tax credits expire. And listeners and viewers, if you want to be a part of this effort, go to stophealthcosthikes.com, stophealthcarehikes.com. I'll have John back and go at length. It's at stophealthcosthikes.com. Tell your legislators what you think about the health credit. John McLaughlin, pollster extraordinaire. Hate to be against you in any primary. I wouldn't want to do that. Wouldn't be prudent, as George H.W. Bush would say. Good to talk to you, John. One of our favorite guests, Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma, joins us. Senator, good to see you. I've got your book in my hand, Turnaround, but because of the unusual rules of the Senate, we can't really talk about your book. Am I allowed to ask you about the wonderful Cindy Lankford laying sod on the house you built? Am I allowed to ask you that?
You can actually on it. Thanks. It's great to be able to see you as well. My wife loves a lot of things about home construction. She will never, ever lay sod ever again. I said it'd be so much cheaper if we just laid the sod ourselves. She was like, no, that's never, that's a one-time event. That's never happening again.
I also would love to talk to Jordan about bees, because that's a genuinely funny story of a very dad moment at the county fair. Can you tell that story before we go to legislation?
I can actually. I love telling a lot of stories in the book, and the book is really focused on how do we turn around a nation and what's actually out there. But one of the things I talk about in the book is sometimes we don't get it right. We think we're going to get it right. We don't get it right. And I tell the story. My daughter, like a lot of people, is afraid of bees. She understands bees are important pollinators. She gets all that. She just doesn't like them. And so at one point, she's about 9 or 10 years old. We're at a county fair, and I see a lady that's over there who is a beekeeper. She has a plastic beehive on her table and her honey for sale and everything else. And I thought it'd be a good moment, kind of a little immersion therapy. I'd walk over, introduce my daughter to the beekeeper, and say, hey, my daughter's afraid of bees, and would you tell her what it's like to be with bees? And so I'm holding my daughter's hand. We walk over. My daughter looks at me and says, Dad, where are we going? Because she sees the bees in the plastic hive there. And I said, I just want you to meet the beekeeper. So I walk up to the table and say, here's my daughter, Jordan. I wanted to meet you and hear what it's like to be able to work with bees. No kidding. Full truth here. The beekeeper, when I introduce Jordan and when I say she's afraid of bees, could you tell her what it's like to work around bees? The beekeeper leans over, looks at my daughter and says, bees will kill you. If bees ever come after you, pull your shirt over your head, run as fast as you can away, but don't scream, because the bees will go down your throat. They'll sting your throat and you'll die. And I was like, wow, this was a really, really terrible idea. I thought this would be a good way to do it. But I walked into the worst immersion therapist ever.
It was. I'm looking forward to our part 2 of this interview, because I'll talk to you about Hannah and the Constitution as well, your other daughter. But the funniest story in the book is run for your life, pull your shirt over your head, forget modesty, and whatever you don't scream. So in the Lankford family, the idea of running away and not screaming is a running joke, and it's literally a running joke. It's about running.
It is.
Turnaround's fabulous. We'll get into the specifics when you're not in the building. Let me ask you about the building. Is the rescission going to pass?
It is going to pass. We're literally in the middle of it right now. I'm downstairs in the basement of the Capitol right now, and upstairs right above me, I just finished up a vote. There's another vote that's going to happen here in a few minutes on it. We're moving through the process. This will remove $9 billion in spending from this year's budget. Some people don't know the difference in all these because all these weird legislative terms, but when you pass appropriation bills, that's law. That's the House, the Senate, the White House have agreed we're going to spend this. If the White House is not going to spend it, it, they have to make a request back to Congress to strike that from the law. That's what's happened. The president has said, here's $9 billion. $8 billion of it is in foreign aid. We think is wasteful foreign aid. $1 billion of it is NPR and PBS. We think is not needed anymore. And we want to ask to have this removed from the law, from the requirement that's there. So we're actually doing that removal today in the Senate. We'll send it to the House tomorrow. And by Friday, the president's going to sign that and strike that $9 billion in savings.
Now, Senator, I have to do for the audience, full disclosure, I worked for PBS, their local affiliate, for 10 years doing the nightly news in L.A., also worked for national PBS, but that was a long time ago, 1992 to 2002. It's before cable, at least before cable spread out across the country. I've never worked for NPR. I've been in the radio business the whole time. So you've been subsidizing my competition this entire time. Not you, but I mean the federal government. I am so glad to finally be on a level playing field with NPR.
You know what's crazy about this? Ronald Reagan actually made a proposal in 1983 to stop subsidizing PBS and NPR. So this is how long this has been discussed. When I grew up, it's probably like you, Hugh. When I grew up, I was the remote control. Okay, mom said, get up, go change the channel on it. But there were only 4 channel options that were out there: ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS. That was it. That's not true anymore. There are lots of ways to get emergency information out. There's lots of availability out there. And the amazing thing is, everybody talks about this is the end of NPR and PBS. NPR gets 90% of their funding from private sources, 10% from the federal taxpayer. PBS gets 85% of its funding from private sources, 15% from the taxpayer. So we're talking about they've just got to make up that delta. They're still going to be there. If MSNBC can find enough sponsors to keep them on the air, I promise NPR and PBS can find enough sponsors to keep them on the air.
Yeah, for a long time, people have asked me why there is no left-wing talk radio, and it's because there is left-wing talk radio. It's just called NPR, and they super serve the left side of the political aisle, and that's fine. It's a very good product, by the way. Steve Inskeep is a friend of this program. Very good product. It just doesn't need a federal subsidy. Senator, I want to turn to the Finance Committee. You're on finance, and so you got to help in the One Big Beautiful Bill along with Mike Crapo and the rest of your colleagues. Do you think there will be a second reconciliation bill anytime soon?
We need to have one. Right now, we're going through rescissions and trying to be able to find another way to be able to reduce spending in this year's budget. But we do need to have another reconciliation bill. The problem is there's no clear definition of what that is. Everybody says, okay, we've got to continue to reduce spending. The reconciliation bill is dominantly about mandatory spending. And so we've got to be able to work through the process of what does that mean? Rescissions are about annual spending. Reconciliation is about mandatory spending. So give us a couple of months to be able to put all the pieces together. Speaker Mike Johnson has already said the House wants to do another reconciliation bill. The Senate's already said that we want to do that. We just got to make sure we get our ducks in a row before we start launching that out.
You know, I want to socialize an idea with you. I'm a senior citizen. I could be collecting Social Security right now. I'm not going to do it until I actually quit. You're not. And I'm wondering, and I'll let you answer this during the break, is there any chance that we can bend the curve on Social Security by raising, say, the retirement age 1 month a year for the next 60 years? In other words, it's 65 right now. I'm 69. I'm going to work at least till I'm 72 and maybe longer. I do not understand why we can't bend the Social Security curve just a little bit to begin to work on our problem. Senator Lankford, you heard my proposal. Do you think we can bend Social Security a little bit?
We can actually. What's interesting, though, is it is prohibited by law in a reconciliation bill. Social Security cannot be touched at all in a reconciliation. It has to be a bipartisan conversation every single time we do anything on Social Security. And so, yes, that can be done. It needs to be done. We're 8 years away from insolvency in Social Security. That means the time is now to be able to do it, not wait till 7 years from now. If you wait 7 years, you've got to have a lot more drastic of a change in Social Security to be able to stabilize it. If we do it right now, it's a whole lot better.
Does that happen in your committee? Is that a finance committee across the aisle conversation? And
it is.
I'm thick. I'm slow. I'm from Ohio. What is it that reconciliation can deal with? Can it only deal with mandatory or with discretionary?
It can only deal with mandatory spending. The only time it can do discretionary is if literally you just label it as a mandatory new something to be able to put in for X amount of time. So there are a few legislative games you can play with that, but the normal spending process that actually happens, you can't turn that off or on. You've got to be able to focus on things like Medicaid, Medicare, other mandatory spending, and there's quite a few that are out there.
But not
those
Social
are the things
Security.
that you can deal with, but not Social
That's
Security.
why
That's
I'm- but
prohibited
not-
by law.
So the only two things you can really do are Medicare and Medicaid. Is that it?
Those are the two. Well, you've got some things like veterans spending, which we're not going to change that, obviously. But there are a few other items that are there. But the biggest items that are mandatory spending: Medicare, Medicaid, and veterans.
The Hugh Hewitt Show with James Lankford, Senator from Oklahoma. His brand new book, Turnaround, is fabulous. I hope I can get him back tomorrow so we can talk about it, because the Senate rules don't let me talk about. I know a lot of the Senate rules, Senator. I've never heard that one before, but you're on ethics. You're the chair. What is that rule?
I am the chairman of ethics, and you can't use federal space to be able to promote your products or resources, which makes sense on it. And it also, you can't do any campaign activities in federal space. So all those things, all those rules make sense. But sometimes you think, oh, okay, I get it. We're talking about what we're trying to accomplish as a country. And with me, with Turnaround, this is not about me, though there's obviously some stories of my family and everything else going on, but it's really a focus on what can we do as a nation to be able to turn it around. And I'm really petrified at the number of people I hear say, well, I voted, and so I solved all the problems. It was like, voting is a good thing, but the nation shifts, not because of just a vote, but Washington doesn't change the country changes Washington. So you ask the question, what can we do to change our neighborhoods, our community? How can we get engaged and be able to turn around a culture that desperately needs good examples all over the country?
Well, what I'm looking forward to talking to you about is actually Nehemiah and Leviticus, because believe it or not, Senator Lankford makes Leviticus interesting, and Nehemiah, I speak Presbyterian. I'm a Catholic, but I speak Presbyterian fluently, so I've actually heard Nehemiah preach. You're a Baptist. Yeah. I do want to close by asking you how hard it was to watch what happened to those youth camps, because you ran a youth camp for all those years.
Very painful. Several different youth folks, and then also camp directors. We've been in a text group together, just talking about the grief and what that means and how incredibly difficult it is. You had a camp of all those young girls. They were just going to sleep. They don't have cell phones because they're at camp and they're away. And the camp director literally lost his life trying to be able to save some of those young girls in the process. It is incredibly painful to be able to see. You send your kids to camp for a great experience, not to lose their life. And as my mom always said to me, the rule is kids never die before their parents. That's the rule. And she would say that to me every time I left the house. And I think about that over and over again of those parents that hugged their little girls and said, I can't wait for you to have a great week at camp. And then that was the last time they saw them.
We'll talk more about that tomorrow, Senator. I want everyone to go out in the meantime, think about Turnaround, because it's a great book for Bible studies, men's group, actually any kind of book group you'll enjoy. Turnaround. I'll talk to you again, Senator. Thank you for joining me today. Want to remind everyone I'm in the Relief Factor studio, and I'm in the Relief Factor studio because I have a sponsor. Unlike NPR and PBS, I actually have to have sponsors that like me, and I love Relief Factor because I got to go kayaking after the program today, and I am not the world's greatest kayaker. That might surprise some of you. You might have thought I was Olympic level kayaking. I know some Olympic kayakers, Bill and Julie, if you're out there listening, but I am not myself an Olympic kayaker, and so I'll be a little bit sore tomorrow because it's a different muscle group that I'm used to using, but that's where Relief Factor comes in. If you've got minor aches and pains, or you exercise every day at the gym, whether you trundle like I normally do, or you're a runner, or a swimmer, or a gym rat, no matter what it is, if you exercise, you get those minor aches and pains. If you're a commuter and you're getting in your car right now, you're probably not feeling so good. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief to get a Relief Factor special introductory pack for $19.95, or just go to their website at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Admiral Mark Montgomery, retired United States Navy, is senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and he is an expert on what we are sending and not sending to Ukraine. So, Admiral, welcome. I want to dive right into that. What did you make of the decision by the president to free up money for Ukraine, and what more ought he or the Congress to do?
Thanks. So, look, I'm happy in general. Now, I don't think he freed up money. He freed up access, and he made it really clear It's going to be European money. And I like that he freed up access. You know, there was a time, particularly post the Zelensky meeting in the White House, where I questioned whether the president would allow access to our defense industrial base for Ukraine as the Biden era Presidential Drawdown Authority and Ukrainian Security Assistance Initiative weapons, finish delivering over some of those over the next few months. Actually, some of them may take a year or two, but there would be a lack of access. That would have been very detrimental to Ukraine because Ukraine, through dint of all the 3 years of giving, is really dependent on U.S. weapon systems, Patriot launchers, NASAMS, another air defense launcher, our Bradleys, our M113 personnel carriers, our 155 artillery. They really, they have our gear. They have our gear. They have to be able to access our defense industrial base. And what the president said there clearly was, I'm allowing you access to our defense industrial base, particularly for defensive munitions. So that's a win. And the Europeans had better step up and buy that stuff, and whether I'm not sure how it's delivered. There's two mechanisms, and there's a little bit of word salad between him and Secretary Rutte, to steal a term from the election. I'm not sure if the weapons are U.S. weapons that are pulled out and then Europe pays for us to get new ones, or they're European weapons that are delivered and then Europe buys replacements from us. But in any case, it's our defense industrial base, our workforce generating money in America for these purchases.
Now, Admiral, what do you understand to be the state of the war along the front line? Is it static, or is Russia grinding forward like the 1918 German offensive before they run out of gas?
So yes, I think yes to both, in the sense that it's broadly static at a macro level, but at a micro level, they're grinding forward in a few areas, and they're going to gain a square mile here, a square mile there. I don't believe they're creating a salient for a significant gain. I don't believe they'll get a significant city to fall, but they will do this. And, I've said this to you before, my experience there in Ukraine tells me they're not going to lose. They're not going to win. They're not going to expel Russia without a dramatic event happening, expel Russia from Eastern Ukraine or from Crimea, but they're not going to lose. The question is, how much critical infrastructure, how many Ukrainian civilians are killed en route to not losing, en route to
Admiral,
an eventual inevitable ceasefire?
I see these horrific attacks every night at 300, 400, 500 drones and cruise missiles and things like that. Why do you suspect the president will not allow offensive weapons to be sold? Because the only way to get Russia to stop that is actually to hit Russia.
So I do think eventually we will sell. Right now, my guess is that Ukraine has less than 20 ATACMS weapons left. Those are our long-range, 300, kilometer, 200-mile strike weapons. I think we'll end up delivering more of those to them. Maybe the Europeans will pay us to replace them. We won't even replace them with ATACMS. We've moved on from ATACMS to a system called PrSM, Precision Strike Missile, which is a more advanced ATACMS, or some naval missiles that have been converted into Army missiles. Doesn't matter. We're not buying these older ATACMS. So I think eventually he will allow the delivery of them with money coming from either Ukraine or from the Europeans to reimburse our stockpile so that we can buy something new. And that's going to be to me, Hugh, that is the kind of weapon that does start moving Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. Defensive weapons won't do.
I agree. Now I want to switch 180 degrees on you to the Middle East and the Pacific. You served in the Pacific a lot. Yesterday, Ron Dermer, Strategic Affairs Minister to Benjamin Netanyahu, did a podcast with our friend Dan Senor, in which he said the strike on Iran, Americans should realize, allows you to do the pivot. In other words, it has so destabilized Iran and weakened Iran that Israel and the Gulf Arab states can become hegemons jointly, keep Iran in a bottle, and allow America to pivot to the Pacific finally. What do you make of that assessment?
So I agree with most of it, just have one qualification. First, I would say it's true, but it isn't the 12 days of strikes by Israel and the 12 hours of strikes by the United States. It's what Israel has done since October 8th. Not necessarily Gaza, although Gaza, they have removed a large part of Hamas. It's what they've done with Hezbollah, with the IRGC in Syria and Iraq, and the Syrian air defense forces, they did a masterful 4-day campaign after Assad fled to destroy the Syrian Air Force and Syrian air defense forces in a way that Syrian airspace is now Israeli airspace. During the 12-day war, the Syrian president said, you could use my airspace. I mean, not sure the choice, right? So it's that whole campaign. Look, the Israelis got beaten bad on October 7th. I would say as a military planning, strategic planning force over the last 18 months, they have hit home run after home run against Hezbollah, against Syria, against the IRGC. I mean, the only thing they haven't wiped out is the same thing we couldn't wipe out. That was the Houthis in Yemen, and they did a better job, I think, than we did on them. But then he's right. We weakened Iran. Look, this is the opportunity to these kind of like extended multi-carrier strike group, 5 or 6 Air Force extra squadrons in Al Udeid and Qatar. I think we can start to pull back from that. We can concentrate our forces. So what that will do is allow us to restore our military readiness so that we're ready for the fight in the Pacific. We're not ready for the fight in the Pacific when we have extra carrier strike groups on station, extra submarines on station, and extra Air Force squadrons. And the Air Force particularly and the Navy are the barometers you have to watch for readiness. And are we ready to fight in the Pacific?
So, Admiral, are we going to do somewhere in the Pacific, whether it's Australia or the Philippines or Japan, expansions to parallel the sort of base structure that we have built up over decades in the Middle East, both in Bahrain and Qatar, in the UAE? I think we might even have some in Saudi. We've got some in Kuwait, some in Iraq. Are we going to do that in the Far East? Is that what's on the table?
So in fairness, we already have a healthy force structure there that has kind of stayed fairly static over 40 years. In other words, since the end of the Vietnam War, we have naval bases in 2 in Japan, 1 in Guam that are fairly large. I mean, among our largest naval bases. We have airfields spread throughout. We have 4 significant airfields in Japan, 2 in Korea, 1 in Guam, and then an alternative in Australia. I think what you're going to see us do is build distributed air power throughout the Philippines, throughout the Marianas, throughout Japan, not on military bases, so that we become a harder targeting problem for China. If we spread our forces throughout Japan and strike, and fight a war in Taiwan from Japan, that's a tough, we're giving a strategic dilemma to China. Are they going to strike all of Japan? That will bring Japan into the war aggressively on the U.S. side. So from my point of view, that's what we'll do. We'll distribute our forces in the Philippines, in a little bit in Australia, and in Japan, and in the Marianas. That's Guam, Tinian.
Will that be provocative, Admiral? Do the Chinese look at that and say, oh, we'd better go now before they distribute all their bases across the 1,000 islands of the Philippines and goodness knows where else? When we do that, do we provoke early assault on Taiwan?
For a minute, I thought you'd gone crazy on me, and you're asking me, should we not provoke China? And of course, I'm from this. If I'm willing, a war with China over Taiwan would cost us 7,000 to 25,000 troops. If we're willing to do that, and we say we are, then we've got to be willing to provoke China, to piss them off with some of our maneuvers, because to be ready for this war, to deter the war, even prevent it from happening, you have to make these posture movements. And that's what you're talking about, expanding our forward posture in the Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia. Yes, we have to do it. I do not think it will provoke them into war. It will provoke them into Khrushchev-like shoe on the podium screaming at the UN. But, I think our answer to that is we have the right to create a deterrent effect for ourselves and our allies and partners. And we have the right to create a positive warfighting situation. We don't complain about their movements within China. We don't complain about their building programs that is clearly targeted the U.S. Navy and U.S. Air Force. They need to understand we're going to protect our forces, and we're going to do what we said we'd do in the Taiwan Relations Act and make sure Taiwan only, joins China at their own decision.
Before I go diving back into President Trump's Oval Office gaggle today, I do want to remind you Consumer Cellular is a great sponsor of ours, consumercellular.com/Hugh. Remember, my code is Hugh25, Hugh25. That will get you $5 off of your first 5 monthly invoices. Now, why should you call Consumer Cellular at 1-800-411-4454? 1-800-411-4454. Oh, if you like money, you want to save money, I am asking you before you call them to please dig out your cell phone bill and find out what you are paying and what you are getting for that. Some of you think you've got a grandfathered unlimited data plan, and you might well have a grandfathered unlimited data plan, and it might cost you $150 a month. You know that 2 people over the age of 50 can get a cell phone with unlimited data for $60 a month from Consumer Cellular. It really doesn't have to be as expensive. They are particularly targeted at the senior and the 50-plus demo, so do give them a call, 1-800-411-4454, or head to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Pleased to welcome Charles C.W. Cooke of National Review. He also is of his own. Oh, you very Floridian today, Charles. A very Floridian look. I like that. That should be your look. Is that your look on the editor's podcast and your own podcast?
Yeah, but you can't see me on those because they're not video podcasts. So
no, I love that shirt. I want that shirt. Please send me that shirt. I have to stick you with the 2 worst subjects of all. I have to stick you with Epstein and the auto pen. Let's start with Epstein. What's your take on this? I've already written mine up at Fox News. There is no there. There is no list. He was a terrible human being. He killed himself. There is no conspiracy. But a lot of people want there to be a conspiracy because it makes them money. That's Hugh's take. What's Charles C.W. Cooke's take?
pretty much exactly that. I think some people seem to have a lot of trouble distinguishing between 2 propositions. One is, and I believe this entirely, that Epstein was a terrible person who did terrible things, probably a great number of criminal things, and deserves our opprobrium. 2, he didn't write down in a database everything that he did. I don't think there is a there either. I don't think there is a list. One of the reasons I don't think that there is a list is there was a civil case against him. There were a lot of high-powered people involved with that. And Joe Biden was president of the United States for years, was desperate to get Donald Trump on something, and must have had all manner of people looking into this. And I think he found nothing concrete. Again, not the same thing as saying Epstein's innocent. He's not. He seems to have been a terrible person. But the idea that, you know, like in a movie, there's a MacGuffin floating out there, a thumb drive with all this information on it, I think is just false.
I agree. Now, I want Matt Walsh, a pretty smart guy, and he's done a lot of good work for the MAGA movement. He posted a couple of minutes ago, Trump was elected in 2016 partly on a pledge to lock her up. Arresting and prosecuting powerful and corrupt people had been a core issue for MAGA since its inception. Hey, I don't agree with that. So that's what the Epstein issue is about. I don't agree with that. And it's why the base can't and won't just drop it. I don't agree with that. What do you think of what Matt's arguing?
Well, I mean, I mostly think that it's not true. Again, I'm mostly with you. I will say there are some people on the right, and there are some people within the MAGA universe who have played with fire for quite a long time in insinuating that there are more conspiracies out there than there in fact are. There's a great deal more cock-up than conspiracy in truth, but they have gone in the other direction. And now the people that they are trying to convince that there is no conspiracy have been primed to believe that, well, if they've turned around now and said there's no conspiracy, they must be in on it too. That's almost infinitely recursive. It's going to be quite difficult. So I think that they've got their work cut out, but I don't believe that this is going to do too much damage to Donald Trump, because I think Trump has proven extremely adept at taking his base with him.
Agreed. And let's move on to the auto pen. But I want to set it up the way I set it up in a Washington Examiner story today. After Donald Trump's house was raided by the FBI, he claimed, not without authority, that he could declassify in his mind, telepathically. He could make the decision. He's the commander-in-chief. It is a complete power unto itself, unified executive, and it's never been tested by the courts. Everyone who knows the law knows it's never been tested. But he made that assertion. The left laughed at it. Now the left is saying Joe Biden can do the same thing with the auto pen on pardons. Can you hold one and not the other? And if so, which one can you hold and not the other?
Well, I think the auto pen question is quite complicated in that, again, 2 things are true at the same time. The first one is that if indeed staff within the White House, without the president's knowledge or sign-off, were using the auto pen to exercise power that's vested in the president, that is an absolutely enormous scandal. But if subsequently Joe Biden, for whatever reason, most probably because he doesn't want to be seen as having been impotent, says, no, I don't have a problem with this, there's just no way that it's enforceable or justiciable. I could imagine a really odd Supreme Court case where a president said, hey, my secretary of whatever was using the auto pen. In fact, that would lead primarily to a criminal prosecution. But if the president says afterwards, no, he did it with my permission, there's just no way that a court is going to want to get involved in that, start second guessing the circumstances of it. It's a political question. It's non-justiciable. So I think that they are similar in the sense that if the president after the fact says, yes, I did it, the chances of there being any meaningful interrogation of it are quite low. I think Trump probably with the classified case understood that as well. Not that that stopped the criminal prosecution until the Supreme Court came in and rendered its verdict on what's the term for it?
Immunity.
Presidential immunity. Yeah.
Well, I do think that Joe Biden faces a political disaster, but it doesn't matter because he's out of the game, and I don't wish him anything but best of luck with his cancer. However, he's got 8 after 8, 2 in a row. His doctor and Anthony Bernal have taken the 5th in front of Senate investigators or Congress. What does that mean politically for 2026, if anything?
I think it's a bit of a wash. I mean, one of the things that has always amazed me about American politics is how quickly it moves. You know, there's 6 years between Watergate and Reagan's 44-state landslide in 1980. The 2 years between the 2008 landslide of Barack Obama and the pushback on the midterm. So, you know, you've got here a remarkable sort of brevity of politics. But it's going to be difficult for the Democrats to get any sort of surge because Joe Biden is still hanging over politics and they haven't managed to recover.
I agree with that completely. Charles C.W. Cooke, thank you. Follow him on X at Charles C.W. Cooke. Listen to his podcast, which carries his own name, and listen to the editors if Rich Lowry ever comes back from vacation or if Jack Butler sits in, which I like. Jack was an intern on the Hugh Hewitt show long ago and far away. So we've got our tentacles everywhere. Thank you, Charles. Sarah C. Bedford covers everything for the Washington Examiner. Sarah, the rescission vote is still underway, I gather. What do you think is going to happen? 51-50 for final approval?
That was what we saw with the procedural votes yesterday evening. Vice President J.D. Vance had to be a tiebreaker. You did have Murkowski, Collins, and McConnell break with Republicans. They aren't happy about the idea of cutting spending. That's not something that they generally like to do. Collins, especially as chairman of the Appropriations Committee, has been unhappy with a lot of the way this has unfolded. So I do think you could see a similar split. Even though some of their concerns had been addressed, PEPFAR doesn't look like it's going to be cut. There is some sort of deal in the works to preserve funding for rural broadcasting and weather emergency alert services. I think the real challenge will be when it goes back to the House.
Now, Hugo is a great editor, so he doesn't need any suggestions from me, but I sure hope somebody at the Examiner follows what happens at NPR and PBS after the rescission, because my guess is nothing will happen at NPR and PBS after the rescission, that they'll be able to make up the donations, make up the deficit from donations, and they will not lay anyone off. Do you think anyone will cover it, Sarah?
Oh, I'm certain there will be a lot of our readers who are eager to see what happens. And yeah, I mean, they've built a loyal partisan audience acting as a partisan media outlet. That's a viable business model for a lot of media outlets, most of them in the mainstream media, actually. So I do think that there is survival that they will have after this. The concern from the Senate lawmakers just has to do with rural notification systems, and that seems to be coming out in the wash here.
But the emergency broadcast system remains, and it will not be impacted at all by this rescission. So I've never understood what that means. Let me now turn to former Congressman, future UN Ambassador Mike Waltz, if he is confirmed. He had his hearing yesterday. Unbelievably, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey accused Congressman Waltz of cowardice. He's a decorated Green Beret, has been in gunfights with the Taliban. How does Cory Booker do this?
Cory Booker has been moving further and further to the left. He clearly has some ambitions for higher office. And so, whether it's talking on the Senate floor for a super long time, trying to break records for what seems to be no reason in particular, this is sort of grandstanding has become part of Cory Booker's brand, to some ridicule on the right. So I don't know that is sort of a credible accusation against Mike Waltz. He did face some tough questions over Signalgate, but overall seems to have come out successful after that hearing.
Well, that's my understanding. He will be confirmed easily after a couple of weeks of the typical meandering around. He might lose Rand Paul, and he might pick up Jeanne Shaheen. There's lots of people talking about different ways, but he'll be confirmed. But I'm just amazed that a guy who does have higher office ambitions would insult a decorated Green Beret. It's not like the military doesn't notice that, is it, Sarah?
No, I think, yeah, it's a crazy accusation, but we see this more and more from Democrats. They're racing past each other to be the most outrageous, the most bombastic and inflammatory. Cory Booker is sometimes leading that race, and they often push the boundaries of sort of decorum and acceptable accusations against their opponents.
Now, Mr. Mamdani was on Capitol Hill today. Do you expect people like Chuck Schumer to endorse him? Because they're stuck with him. Break it, buy it, endorse it, you got it.
I think they will. I think you'll see that, especially because people like Chuck Schumer are more afraid than socialism. They are afraid of losing their jobs. They're afraid of the wrath of the left. And Chuck Schumer has already had a brush with that over shutdown politics. He probably doesn't want to ignite the fury of the left again. They're afraid that this may be the future of their party, and that might be a reasonable fear, but they don't really have a choice except to back Mamdani here.
Does Mamdani become the face of the Democratic? I argued earlier today on Fox, yes, he does, because the mayor of New York City, the greatest city in the world, and he can ruin it overnight and fire the police commissioner and the education czar. Do you think he becomes their emblem?
Well, Republicans certainly hope so, and I think he is pushing to have his brand of far less left activist politics become the new brand of the Democratic Party. But this couldn't come at a worse time for Democrats, because part of the criticism that Republicans have, and that crucially voters have, is that when they're given power, they don't know how to govern well. They can't govern cities well. They can't govern states well. And so if Mamdani's plans go into effect and, as predicted, have really serious negative consequences for New York City, that could be a real issue for Democrats.
Yeah, when you run on communist issues like decommodification of housing, it's not going to go well in New York. Sarah C. Bedford, follow her on X, read her in the Washington Examiner. Thank you, Sarah. Bethany Mandel is my guest, as she is each week. She is the founder or co-founder of the momwars.substack.com. Bethany, I want to get right to this. I was on Fox earlier today. I got asked by John Roberts about Mr. Mom. Yeah, okay. I think Mamdani is an anti-Semite. I don't even think it's close. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck and flies like a duck or doesn't fly like a duck, it's a duck. What do you think? Is he an anti-Semite?
100%. It's not a question to me. Globalize the Intifada. I mean, when they tell you who they are, believe them.
Well, he said he would encourage people not to use the term. And what I said to John, that's like saying, I will encourage people not to deny the Holocaust. That's not really necessary. If the Holocaust happened, and so when you said there, I'm going to discourage him, what is he trying to do there?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, discourage people from using the term that he himself used. He's seeing the fact that...
No, I don't know that he's used it. Has he used it,
Oh,
Bethany?
really?
I don't know that he's used it. I don't think he's used it. I think in the Bulwark interview, he refused to condemn it.
Yes.
And now he's
That's
been
correct.
caught in that. But let me run
Yes,
down.
that's correct. Thank you.
On October 8th, okay, the day after the massacre, his first public statement, he said a just and lasting peace can only begin by ending the occupation and dismantling apartheid. He did not mention Hamas. What does that tell you?
Yeah, no, his immediate tweets following October 7th were really honestly very terrifying. And he was nobody back then, and so he felt like he could say whatever he wants. And now that he's, much more in the spotlight, he's trying to become the next it boy for the Democrats. And I think he's well on his way, by the way. I think that, he understands, but he first has to become mayor of the most populous Jewish city in the world. And there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of fear in New York City. I think that through the narcissism of Eric Adams, Andrew Cuomo, and Curtis Lewa not coming together and, drawing straws and picking the one of them that's going to run against him, he could waltz into that position.
Okay, second thing he did, he has systematically supported BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction against Israel since he was at Bowdoin College more than a decade ago. BDS is almost synonymous with anti-Semitism. I suppose it's possible to be pro-BDS and not be an anti-Semite, but barely.
I've never met I've never met a non-anti-Semitic BDS supporter. So if he's the first, I congratulate him. He's a real trailblazer.
All right. He did not sign a resolution in the New York State Assembly recognizing the Holocaust. What's that tell you? I'm just reading from Politico, by the way. This is not a conservative website. This is Politico.
That one is news to me. Wow. What could possibly? I'm trying to game out the opposition there. I'm a little perplexed. What is controversial about decreeing the Holocaust?
Let me read it to you. As an Assembly member, Mamdani was one of 5 lawmakers in the state legislature's lower chamber that did not sign 2 resolutions condemning the Holocaust and the other one honoring Israel. I think he's an anti-Semite, Bethany. I don't think this is close.
I mean, what you said before, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, here we are.
So what do we do if he wins? I mean, it's a big city. It matters. It's the biggest city it's got the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. I think LA is third. What do we do?
It's the most populous Jewish city in the world. Not Jerusalem, not Tel Aviv. It's New York City.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
it won't be
I think
by the
Curtis
time
should
he's
drop
done
out.
being
I
mayor.
know
I can
Curtis a
probably
little
guarantee
bit.
that.
Yeah, agreed. Do you think he'll do anything about the crazy anti-Semites at Columbia? No.
No. I mean, what scares me more actually than the anti-Semitism at Columbia, which it looks like, by the way, they're going to get a slap on the wrist. If reports are true about the deal that they're going to get from the Trump administration, I'm really concerned. But putting that aside, what actually scares me is the physical safety of visibly Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn. There has been a decade of real serious violence against them, getting punched in the face, getting slashed, getting you name it. I'm afraid for the physical safety of those folks. If I were a millionaire, I would be investing in creating like Orthodox enclaves in states like Texas and Florida, because we're going to see an exodus.
Oh, that's interesting, and that's going to destroy Manhattan's economic viability. Capital is mobile. I always say that to people. Capital doesn't have to stay in New York. It can go to London. It can go anywhere it wants. And it will soon be going to Tel Aviv and Abu Dhabi because they get along just fine. Let me close by, he criticized lawmakers attending Israel Day parade. He opposed an Israeli independence resolution. It was like, I think you put your finger on it. When he didn't matter, he was all in for anything that was anti-Israel and anti-Jew. And now that he's in the limelight, he's going to moderate. But will Democrats go with him? Will they buy his charade now?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that there's a lot that's on the record. American Jews are not. I mean, American Jews vote overwhelmingly to our detriment for the Democrats. That said, only 12% voted for him in New York City. Shockingly bad numbers for a Democrat in New York City. I mean, I think we're going to see a real uptick in violence in Brooklyn, and people are going to flee.
Now, have you seen in the Jewish community? If I were a Jew in New York, I would be supporting Eric Adams. I know Curtis. Yeah. I like Curtis. He can't win. I dislike Andrew Cuomo. He can't win. So people ought to vote for Eric Adams. He might be mediocre, but it's better than being anti-Semitic and a communist. Is that a good thing to run on?
No, I think so. I mean, Eric Adams, it would be my choice if I were still a New York City resident, and I thank God that I'm not a New York City resident. I have a lot of friends who they're homeowners in New York City. They own their apartments in New York City, and they're afraid they don't know what to do because they can't just pick up and leave. They can't let their lease expire, and the value of their property, especially in these Orthodox enclaves, is going to tank. This is all their money.
I hadn't even thought about that. Well, what they ought to do, what everyone ought to do in New York, is just resolve to vote for Eric Adams and forget Andrew Cuomo and forget Curtis. And God bless you, Curtis. You've done good work for the city. Not so much former Governor Cuomo, but Eric Adams, not an anti-Semite and maybe a little bit corrupt on when it comes to airline upgrades, but that's not really the same thing as not condemning Hamas on October 8th. Bethany Mandel, themomwars.substack.com. Thank you, Bethany. I want to remind you of a couple of things. One, if you will join my YouTube followers, I would greatly appreciate it. Go to Hugh Hewitt on YouTube. Like and subscribe. To borrow from the friends at Ruthless Podcast, if you wish to opine. Yes, I do read those as well, but I really would like you to watch what we send you. We don't send you a lot, but when we do interviews that are important and significant, I do make a habit of sending it to you. Also want to remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Took it now number 1. I'm reminding you now, I'm actually going out on the river later tonight and going to go kayaking, which may or may not end well. I'm not really the world's most gifted kayaker, but I'm going to try. And that will probably, of course, create a little bit of soreness in the muscles right here because I don't usually normally do this paddling business. But I'll be fine because I took my Relief Factor today, and I take it every day, and you ought to give it a try no matter what your preferred exercise is this summer. Some of your preferred exercise lying down because it's so hot. But other than that, if you're going to walk, run, work out, swim, kayak, I don't care what you do. Do archery. I've got a friend who does archery. At least his family does archery. Whatever it is, Relief Factor will make it easier for you. Gets rid of the minor aches and pains. Do not mask your pain with over-the-counters. Get rid of it with anti-inflammatories that are natural. They support your body's anti-inflammatory system. All you have to do is call 1-800-4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or head over to their website, find the starter pack for $19.95. Less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Finally, as I've said a few times during the course of the day today, Politico did the complete evidentiary laydown on Mr. Mamdani. I would encourage you to go and find it. It is in June 22nd of this year. Just do Politico, June 22nd, Mamdani, and you'll find it, and you'll conclude, yes, indeed, he is an anti-Semite. Now, let me conclude by saying, no matter who you are, what your religious background, no matter what your political views are, if you saw what happened in Texas last week, your heart's going out to them. A lot of you have stepped up. Thank you. Thank you very much. We partner with Food for the Poor that is sponsoring a campaign to rush relief supplies there. They've got a center open and operated in San Antonio. All you have to do, and that's in the Hill Country, it's Central Texas, all you have to do is go to HughHewitt.com, find the Help Texas banner. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, it's there on the screen. Help Texas is over at my website at the very top. If you hit that button, it'll send you right to the place you can donate securely. You can also call 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-4673. Or just text Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. That's Hewitt to 51555. The devastation is extraordinary. The ongoing work of cleaning up is continuing apace, but they need help. They need relief supplies. Food for the Poor, tax-deductible gift. They'll make sure it counts. It will get to those people. You can trust them. Food for the Poor. The banner is Help Texas at the top of HughHewitt.com.